Hi everyone. We're going to talk about betrayal, which is sort of a heavy topic for a Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening. Today's actually my mom's birthday. She is the OG survivor. She's not here. Was just checking to make sure I sent her a birthday cake from the grocery store. So everyone just sort of send some birthday love mom's way. She's the reason I'm sitting here because I don't know that this work would be so passionately driven if it had not been part of my story. So send mama some love. We didn't think she was even going to make it to this birthday, so it's a good year. So anyhow, let's talk about betrayal. Not such a good year. I want to start by saying that, first of all, welcome to this free event. I know some of you aren't, I'm Dr. Ramani. I probably should introduce myself. I know this isn't just our healing program, which is usually our seminar. So for those of you who usually don't hear me in these workshops and programs, welcome. I hope you find today to be very, very helpful and that we are able to bring some things. Let me just move my little fancy mic in there and so you can hear me. I'm hoping you find today useful on what's a very difficult topic, which I'm hoping to give you some kind of information on. And, I think that one of the things I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be sharing stories. One of the hardest things about going through narcissistic abuse is that we honestly, until we sort of start unearthing it, we think we're the only person who's going through it. They're like, nobody else is in this whack of situation. All my friends are functioning well. Nobody's getting betrayed like this. No one's got parents like mine. No one's in a job like mine. We really get into those places, and that's very, very normal. Okay. So one of the things that I want to just really highlight is how important it is. And I'm going to be sharing true stories today, which obviously I've stripped every detail from. So you wouldn't know who these are, but these are true stories I'll be sharing today. Because I personally believe that one of the most important parts of healing, especially from betrayal and from narcissistic abuse, is hearing other people's stories for no other reason, not so you can say, oh my gosh, their story was worse than mine, but rather that you can see that things like betrayal show up in so many forms. We're not the only ones going through it. Because really the goal here is that we stop thinking that we're responsible for this. We are never responsible for our own betrayal. So can we sit with that for a minute and repeat it at home? If we were all in a room, we'd all be saying it together. We are never responsible for our own betrayal. I need you to hold on to that because part of healing from betrayal is understanding that fully. Okay. And we're going to be revisiting that and all the stories we have today. And again, I want to just say a couple of things. This is because this is a free seminar. We have many more people attending than we usually would. We don't have the comments enabled because I would probably get overwhelmed at all. And so would you. So, but if you have questions about tech, something's not working right on this, please put them in the Q&A. My team, Kelly, Irene, and Zaide, who always are sort of helming the battle stations here, they will be able to answer any of those questions. And at the end, it might even be some time, I'll be able to take a look at some of your questions too, and stuff might come up as I'm talking about this, right? As I think when I think about the word betrayal, some of you, especially those in the United States, might have watched the TV show Betrayal. I was fortunate to be a part of that project, and it was Jen Faison's story of betrayal. I'm going to be talking about some other stuff, programs we have to offer, and Jen's part of one of them. Jen Faison's story of betrayal. I'm not gonna tell it to you because I would actually go listen to her podcast or watch her series or listen to something we're going to sort of connect you with too. It's probably one of the worst stories of betrayal I've ever heard. And I think it's very interesting to sort of hear what the worst case looks like and how a person plays that out. But there were elements of her story, right, which were very unique in the sense that there was a strange sort of justice in her story. And one of the things I'm going to touch on today is this idea of betrayal and injustice, that many times the betrayer gets away with it. So I do want to, I will come back to that point at the very end of what we're talking about. So as we go through this program, I want you to just sort of, if you have a piece of paper in front of you or a device or even just in your own mind, I just want you to reflect on what the first word that comes to mind when you think of the word betrayal is. Just sit for a minute and just free associate, right? And even as I did that right in this moment, and I've been living betrayal for weeks as I prepared this, the first word that came to my mind personally was lie. It'd be curious to know what yours were, but like I said, just put it in the Q&A. And then the other thing to reflect on, obviously to not share, but to reflect on yourself. If you're here, you've been betrayed. I don't know that the topic would be interesting to you otherwise. Anyone who's ever been in a narcissistic relationship has been betrayed. That's definitional, right? So you can even think about what have been the primary betrayals and how have these shaped you? How do they affect how you go through the world? And really sit with that too. Sorry, those of you who don't know Dr. Ramani don't know she has a chronic cough. So then I'm going to tell you something interesting that came up as I prepared this presentation. I was sitting in the bathroom or something like that, scrolling through my phone, and I came across an article in People magazine, which is a very populist magazine. It's meant to sort of cater to everyone, you know, whomever. It's not a fancy magazine or anything. And in this article, it was a story about a man who had cheated on his wife. And this article was a feel-good story about how they came back from it and they're better than ever together. And we're so happy, even though he cheated on me. And I was so frustrated. Listen, good for you. I'm happy for you. I'm always happy when people are happy. But those kinds of stories are what mess with the heads of people who go through narcissistic relationships, right? Because the betrayals you go through in a narcissistic relationship aren't the same as a somewhat decent person who has an indiscretion, who might have gotten married too young, where there's an attempt to have a repair, because that happens, right? I don't think the relationship ever goes back to the same if there's infidelity. I don't think it ever returns to what it was. I think a lot of people get to the other side. The dynamics change. I don't think it's the same for everyone. But I think when I read that article, I thought, shit, if somebody who was going through narcissistic abuse and was cheated on and read this article, I was so concerned about people saying, what's wrong with me? Maybe I'm unforgiving, all of that. So we're going to get to that because no, you're not. And articles like this, you never read articles in People magazine about somebody who was wronged and wronged and wronged and wronged, because that's not so feel good. So I'm going to come back to that point too. So again, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share some stories of betrayal, right? And part of what today's about is I don't want you to feel alone in this. So let me just share with you. And I had to actually went back and I was looking at notes I had made over the many, many, many years of doing this work. So here are some of the stories of betrayal I've worked with folks on in a clinical arena. And all these people did get to the other side, but it was one hell of a bumpy road. So here's one. The guy who repeatedly denied cheating on his wife, and even her own friends gaslighted her, telling her, oh my gosh, you're lucky you're married to such a good person. And one of that group of her friends, who she really relied on for support, and was actually the one who really was sort of a champion of the husband, slept with this woman's husband. So she got a double betrayal out of that one. Then there was a person I worked with whose brother, and he thought they had a close relationship, and he would actually really vehemently defend his brother to other people. And he also, they lived they lived in different parts of the country, far away. So, and the brother lived near the parents. So he trusted his brother to manage the parents' financial affairs. The brother, who was ragingly narcissistic, I would say in this case, maybe psychopathic, not only financially abused the parents, both of whom were quite ill. So they just were too tired, almost like too exhausted to make decisions, like one had dementia. He also weaseled his way into the family trust, was able to take the brother's entire inheritance, which the brother was hoping to use to be able to support a child who needed some of his help. And then and the brother, again, double betrayal. Not only the financial betrayal, triple betrayal, financial betrayal, watching the betrayal of the elderly parents, and then the brother, fighting at your brother, just was able to steal everything and actually turn the parents against him. So at the very end, this person was actually a very kind person, was even asked not to come to the funeral by all the extended family and friends. He was able to sort of turn around against this person because, again, that whole family and extended family all lived far away. Let me give you another one. Worked with a guy whose wife, no, sorry, I work with the wife. Okay. So in this case, it was a guy. The wife had been struggling to take care of two older parents, and she had always tried to be very, very supportive of the husband's career. And his career required travel from time to time as the nature of the work he did. He was a clear-cut vulnerable narcissist, no two ways about it. And he would always complain, my life isn't fair, my life isn't fair. He was very passively aggressively competitive with her. It's interesting because she didn't get to go all the fancy places, but she was very, very smart. So in a way, it's like when she opened her mouth, like he was put to shame. So there's this passive aggressive competition he'd have with her. And he was also resentful that he felt other people had all these opportunities he didn't have. He ended up taking what's called a fellowship, where they give you money to do your work. He took a fellowship in another country, and the wife, who was very trauma bonded to this husband, supported him because she thought, well, maybe this will bring him around. Maybe he will change. Maybe he will become nicer. And so she supported that. So she kept their household running. He went to another country. She took care of their pets. She was running herself ragged, not only also working, but also managing her sick parents. She was doing it all alone. And then I think it was like on that, you know how you have the cloud and things pop up on iPads and all that other stuff. She found out that he had been maintaining sort of a digital, like online kind of affair with a woman for 2 years, and the fellowship was going to put him geographically closer to her. This woman had even underwritten the cost. The client, the wife, had even underwritten some of the costs of some of these trips. Like she'd pay for the airfare because some of the fellowships didn't have enough money. That allowed him to even initially meet this woman he ended up having this more like electronic affair with, right? So she felt not only betrayed, but she felt foolish, that she's like, oh my gosh, I paid for this guy to not only go follow his foolish dreams, but so he could go find the person he would betray me with. Okay. Then another one, I'm full of them. Let me tell you, this has been an interesting 2 weeks. There was a person who, during a process of divorce, was absolutely reached. This was a person getting a divorce from a narcissist. And they made it a part of their parenting agreement was that they would not introduce the children to new partners too quickly. They had 3 kids. It was really, the divorce process was not pleasant. It was tough on the kids. The kids were rather sort of taken by surprise. So too was the person being divorced. And what does the narcissistic ex do? Almost immediately introduced the children to a new partner. And this is a good one, guys. He said to the ex-wife, oh no, this is just somebody who this is a mutual friend, because it was a mutual friend. Well, she came to find out after the divorce, he had been cheating on her, the wife, with the friend. And then they get divorced. He managed to keep that secret. They split up. He asked for the divorce, and she was completely shocked by it, right? That woman was a friend to the couple. And now and so that's why he was using that as the premise to introduce the kids to the woman by saying it was our friend, our mutual friend. How can you say that's a problem? But in fact, they were in a relationship. So now you have gaslighting mixed with betrayal. You can see that this bar has a lot of cocktails to mix. We mix all this stuff together, right? So this woman literally felt like she was out of her mind. And when she would keep petitioning the court for this, it was getting really hard because he was able to show evidence this is just our friend. And within 6 months, he was engaged to this new person. So this is another one. And I'm going to put this almost as an example to you, because this is sort of based on what someone had once shared with me. Let's say you tell someone, again, this is someone's story. You tell your friend some embarrassing information about your relationship. And this person you share the information with is part of a bigger group of friends you have. And one night, because that friend you have known for a long time, but that friend also always needs to be the center of attention, that friend let slip some of this. So she framed it as a scandal, right? You find out, because you weren't there that night, you find out after the fact, because people are sort of asking you or looking funny at you, and you find out that they shared your absolutely embarrassing confidential information. And you were so clear, please don't ever tell this to anybody. This is absolutely going to mess up my life if this gets out. They give you some nonsensical excuse about how they had been drinking. And frankly, stop making such a big deal out of this. Nobody cares about your drama. So again, gaslighting meets betrayal, very common. I'm giving you these examples because these are real examples. I can see the faces of these people, okay? And they did get through to the other side, and there was hurt and there was anguish, there was all of it. We got to the other side. Betrayal, like grief, like many of these processes, but were these people changed? I'd say in every case they were changed. So I'm not going to I'm not going to sell you some eternal sunshine of the spotless mind nonsense here about like, oh, you go through a betrayal and then you come out the other end and then you're in People magazine telling everyone how happy you are. It ain't that. This is definitely not that. Okay. Because I truly believe, and in my new book too, I write about this, that I believe that one of the cores of narcissistic abuse is betrayal. I've never seen, and I've seen thousands of them, I've never seen a narcissistic relationship where there is no betrayal. Okay. Now, is betrayal the only thing that happens? Absolutely not. Let's throw in dismissiveness, invalidation, manipulation, gaslighting, rage, passive aggression, overt aggression. You know the laundry list, future faking, blame shifting. You know it all. But betrayal has one of the best seats in the house when it comes to what happens in narcissistic abuse. Okay. Now, what happens is, and here's where it gets tricky. That's why I was on the fence about, do I open with like big ticket stories of betrayal? Because some of these are also subtle, right? They're subtle until they weren't subtle, right? And so I think that the tricky part here is we get confused. When do we get to use this betrayal? Like, what constitutes betrayal? We're going to talk about it as a definition in a moment. Like when a person goes through an infidelity or a big lie, like somebody sort of emptied the family bank accounts or something like that, we know that that's a betrayal. And in fact, when you can take sort of that story out into the world, you're able to get more support. If I had $1 for every single client I have ever worked with who had a narcissistic person who didn't cheat on them, betrayed them in every other way you could betray a person, but they didn't cheat on them. And they're like, oh, if this person just cheated on me, I'd have a sort of almost like the sense of I'd have a better leg to stand on, right? But betrayal's betrayal. I do agree it can be on a continuum in the sense of it can be more repeated, it can be more intense. Sometimes betrayals can be dangerous. I've known many clients who have gotten sexually transmitted infections from partners who were unfaithful and did not use protection and gave them an illness. And so trust me when I say there's a continuum here. This is not just somebody hurting your feelings. There can be real ramifications to this, right? But we get confused when it's not these big things. Like I said, financial betrayals, maybe even sharing confidential information, that kind of thing. But I'm going to put it to you a different way. And I want you to think about this. This is one of the things I really wanted to make clear on this workshop. Wouldn't you argue, I hope you would agree, and if you don't, I hope you agree by the end of this workshop, that the willingness within a narcissistic relationship, the willingness that someone would deny who you are, your personhood. They would deny and shame your wants. They would deny and shame your needs, your aspirations, your values, what happens to you, would have no problem leaving you feeling guilty or like you're the bad person for just doing the basic things of being a person, like having an aspiration or wanting to speak your mind, share a feeling, that kind of thing. And that isn't it a betrayal when a person is okay with thinking that there can be a massive power differential in a relationship, that power and domination are fine. And that's what they're doing. And every tactic in the relationship is about that. That's not what you signed up for, right? That's not what you signed up for. And I think that one of the painful things, that's tougher with a parent, because obviously you're a baby when you come into their lives, or caregiver. In adult relationships, this has a different flair. Some of you might have heard my episode of Navigating Narcissism with Dr. Jennifer Fried. For those of you who are interested in more about this, I can even have my team sort of drop some of the links to some of her stuff, but or we can share it in another way. Definitely, if you go to Navigating Narcissism in that episode, all her stuff is there. But Dr. Jennifer Fried, she talks about something so interesting. She talks about this idea of the duties of a relationship. And by duty, she doesn't mean like who takes out the trash. She means that when we go into a relationship, healthy, honest, decent people go into a relationship, there are things we're supposed to bring. Okay. And those duties might be, there's a little wiggle around that, but we're talking about fundamentally trust, empathy, compassion, bare minimum. But when you get into a narcissistic relationship, because it's not like we share contracts at the beginning. I wish we did. I wish we had informed consent at the beginning of a relationship. You're like, whoa, okay, yeah, I'm not signing up for this power domination thing. Yeah, no thanks. Lovely meeting you. Bye. But they don't share that. I'm not even convinced a narcissistic person knows it. One of the key fundamental funky issues about narcissism is that they're not aware of what motivates their behavior. In fact, we have a YouTube video where I say like why you should never ask the narcissistic person the question why. When you ask them why, they always scream at you. And why do they scream at you? Because they don't actually know their why, and that brings up shame, and so they scream. Healthy people know their why. We may not always be correct, and sometimes it's really uncomfortable to know our why, but knowing our why can actually sort of clean things up. They're never going to get there. So, but as a result of all of this, they're not presenting correctly with the duties of a relationship. The duties of a parent are to keep a child safe, loved, nurtured, seen, heard. That's the duties. And if a parent isn't doing that, they're not fulfilling the roles and responsibilities of that relationship. I hate to bring it down to such brass tacks because it sounds very unromantic when we think about like duties. Ugh. But when you enter a relationship, trust, safety, compassion, kindness, respect, those are our roles. Never going to happen in a narcissistic relationship. So when that doesn't happen, that qualifies as a betrayal, which is why a lot of people in narcissistic relationships will say, you know what, this fool didn't cheat on me. They didn't even mess around with money. Like they didn't do big stuff, but why do I kind of feel so sick? The same way a person might feel sick if they were cheated on. Like, but that thing didn't happen to me. I'm here to tell you it kind of did, because you were doing those other things. You were holding up your side of it. And whatever mixture of lies and anything they were doing, and we're going to talk about what constitutes betrayal in a moment, that was sort of twisting the conversation. We're going to talk about the academic definition. It was actually really interesting to wander through the academic literature on betrayal. I wasn't thrilled with it, but this person named Rockman, wrote a paper in 2009. They said betrayal is the sense of being harmed by the intentional actions or omissions of a trusted person. I don't agree. I don't think it's entirely a sense of. I actually think betrayal is the behavior, right? Betrayal is the person lying to you. Betrayal is a person cheating to you. When we just make it about our sense of it, we don't trust that, right? So we need someone to say, yeah, no. That was betrayal. And those two things line up. The way we feel, the thing that happens often lines up. But I think too many of the psychological definitions focus on how we feel. How we feel is part of it, but it's not what makes it a betrayal. It's their behavior. It's their violation of trust that makes it a betrayal. So, and these can be actions, these can be omissions, right? Not every betrayal is what they do. A betrayal can also be what is not done, what is not said, right? And so we're in a moment, I'm going to talk about what Dr. Fried and others have talked about in terms of betrayal trauma. Betrayal trauma and the fallout of betrayal trauma is what happens to us when our fundamental trust in a person who we believed we could trust is betrayed. It's why we don't feel betrayal trauma in the same way if a stranger lies to us, right? We might be angry if a plumber lies to us or a car repair person lies to us. We probably don't feel betrayal trauma. I don't think I'd ever go to my mechanic and say, you betrayed me. I would say you're a thief, but I don't know that I'd say, and I don't think any of us would use the word betrayed. So let's talk about what betrayal looks like. Commonly, the things that qualify as betrayal are when people harmfully share confidential information about us that we never intended for getting out, or even things like images of us in, sexual images or any of that would qualify as a betrayal. Medical information about us would be a betrayal. Any form of disloyalty, that we thought that there would be someone who would stick by us and then they don't, and then they disappear and they don't do the things they're supposed to do. That feels like a betrayal. Infidelity is obviously a classical betrayal. And remember, and someday we're going to have to do a workshop on infidelity only, but infidelity takes in so much territory and it means different things to different people. For some people, infidelity is some people having sex. For other people, infidelity is any form of romantic contact. For other people, infidelity is sort of electronic sharing of, like even a texting relationship with someone that's outside of the primary relationship. That can be infidelity. And I'm going to tell you here, nobody gets to tell you infidelity is only if people were in the same room with each other or they're only having sex. If it felt like a betrayal, it was a betrayal. I don't like it when people argue with survivors and try to say, well, it was only electronic, or well, they only kiss. Well, nothing. Your psyche was affected by this. So that qualifies. And this sort of like trying to sort of shapeshift around the betrayal, that does not work. And obviously any form of dishonesty, lying, and those are also on a continuum. There's lies and there's lies, but lies are a form of betrayal. By definition, betrayals can be traumatic and they cause a lot of distress to the person being betrayed. There's interesting work too that talks about the idea of mental contamination. Listen to this one, folks, because this is interesting. There's the idea that when people are betrayed, they themselves feel dirty. I'm sure many of you identify with this. So you've done nothing wrong. You're living your life. You're showing up as a decent human being. You're listening. You're believing in this other person. And then they betray you. In the most extreme cases, in fact, this is Rockman's research, when people have OCD, they really feel it. Like literally, there might even be like compulsive behavior, like trying to clean and wash and all of that. But even in people who don't have that, there can be this sense of dirtiness, in the way that you are almost in proximity to something dirty. But what that dirtiness can do, it's not just as simple as you feel that mental contamination. The mental contamination can take you to a place of shame, as though I am as bad as the betrayer because I'm associated with the betrayer. I was married to this person. I was this person's child. I was this person's friend. I worked with this person. And we carry that around as a sort of dirtiness. And survivors will talk about like, ooh, they'll do the ooh, like that shudder, that just that sense, that physiological sense of disgust. And they'll even feel like that some people who've been through betrayal, any form of betrayal, they will say, I'm obsessively cleaning all the time. I'm cleaning, cleaning, cleaning. And that's often an offset to that sense of mental contamination. But like I said, I want to come back to my original point. By definition, narcissistic relationships are about betrayal. And when you don't see it, right? This is why I do what I do. This is why I make new YouTube videos every day. This is why I do the healing program. This is why I write the books, for one reason only. Because probably the biggest intervention, it's going to get you 75% of the way, is you've got to be able to see the narcissistic relationship for what it is. It's not going to make them change, but by seeing it, that's really what allows them to persist. If we don't see them, that's what allows them to persist. I'm not saying it gets easier when you can see it, but it definitely starts shifting that burden of blame, right? So Jennifer Fried talks about this idea of betrayal trauma. Trauma is one of those funny words where for the longest time, it was really like people are saying, can we please stick to the big T trauma, kidnapping, sexual assault, military trauma, that kind of thing, violence. But what we've learned is our brain doesn't necessarily make those discriminations. Our brain only knows, and our body, frankly, brain and body together, know from lack of safety. That's what we know. And that is why someone screaming at us can be a form of trauma, especially if there was a time in our life we were screamed at and we thought there was impending danger. So when people tell you you're too sensitive, like they're just screaming, you're not. Your nervous system and your body have encoded this differently. Betrayal is very similar to that. So when we see the work on betrayal trauma, right, it's when anyone we trust or depend on, and these can be people, these can even be institutions, like, for example, the judicial system or something like that, a hospital. When those people or places violate your trust or your well-being, that's what betrayal trauma is. So things like this, things would be, for example, abuse by a parent, caregiver abuse, or any form of violation of trust in an intimate relationship. That's where we most profoundly see betrayal trauma. But any of you who have gone through the hellscape of family court, I would argue that the invalidation of family court, the willingness of family court to make custody decisions that you're saying, oh my gosh, this is actually going to harm my kids. That to me is a form of betrayal trauma. Dr. Fried and I have talked about this. She agrees with that. And so her work, the work of her and others who have worked in betrayal trauma, is really the first time we're seeing this linkage, probably in the last 20, 25 years, this linkage between what happens in betrayal and that loss of trust and safety in the world, because all of you have been betrayed, particularly the uniqueness of the narcissistic relationship. What happens in the narcissistic relationship, folks, is you aren't just betrayed once, you're betrayed all the time. Maybe not every day, but because even if the betray thing is not happening every day, you're feeling less and less safe in this relationship, right? So this thing you can theoretically count on, you can't. That's a betrayal. The child can't count on the parent. The person can't count on the spouse. The person can't count on the friend or the family member. Things you should be able to count on. It's almost like if this chair gave way, like if every chair in my house, the legs kept breaking, I'd be real anxious about sitting down, right? The things we think are going to be there for us, that we are putting our part into, and they don't, that's betrayal. And that's what happens daily, like I said, at some level in a narcissistic relationship, right? So here's where I want to say the betrayal gets very tricky, right? So what gets really tricky is that if we detect that somebody has betrayed us, okay? So let's say we detect that an intimate partner has betrayed us, right? Or we detect that a family member has betrayed us, right? Wouldn't it make sense that the first thing we'd say is, get the hell out of my life, right? And all of us wish we could have done that, especially with the narcissist. As someone who has been cheated on repeatedly about narcissists, when I go back, I feel a sense of shame. I'm like, why didn't I say the first time, get the F out of my life, right? But I didn't, right? And a lot of you didn't either. It's not because we're foolish. It's not because we're codependent. It's not because we are suckers. It makes sense we would tell the betrayer to go, because now we've determined this is not a safe person, right? But, and here's the big but, and this is where I love Freud's research. If the person who betrayed us is someone we need, someone we love, someone we are told we love, someone we feel loyal to, or is part of our status quo, long-term relationship, long-term marriage, a parent, a job you've had for a really long time, right? And I'm going to put an and or in here. The relationship is sometimes good and sometimes bad. And sometimes there's been moments in this relationship where you're like, I actually think this person gets me and they made a mistake. And how am I ever going to find someone that gets me? That kind of thing. You put all that together. Instead of saying, you're not safe, you betrayed me, go away, or I'm going to leave. It's very tricky. It's not as simple as I'm going to leave, because leaving represents its own form of loss of safety, right? And so then what does that mean? Cognitive dissonance. We can't have betrayal and I live with you, betrayal and I stay with you, betrayal, we're having Thanksgiving dinner together. It doesn't work like that. So there is an advantage. One would argue an almost a survival advantage to basically ignoring the betrayal. Just whoosh, and remember, anyone who's listened to me talk about Freud's work, she talks about the whoosh, like, how funny, yeah, that's right, they did cheat on me 5 years ago. How did I forget that? Or, oh my gosh, that's right, my mother did do that to me, and how did I forget that, right? Now, as you can imagine, this dynamic is most pronounced for anyone who went through these betrayals in childhood, right? Because if a child was to see that a parent was betraying them, especially for a younger child, but I'd say any child, it's catastrophic, because the child has a survival need for that attachment. So children are much more likely, and this is where we see dissociative phenomenon. This is where we see trauma being held physiologically, but not cognitively. All those things are happening because the child can't lose this attachment. There's no plan B for a kid. A kid can't go on like, oh, I don't like this one, I'm going to go on Parent Hinge and find someone new. It doesn't work like that, right? So again, there is a social advantage. There is an attachment advantage, if you will, to not see the betrayal. And this not seeing actually has as much power as avoiding the pain, right? If we go into denial about betrayal, we don't have to feel the pain, and the pain is profound. And that's not a foolish thing to do. Who sticks their hand in a pot of boiling water? Nobody. And it's the same thing with psychological pain. Most of us pull away from it because it's really painful. Human beings don't run toward pain. And part of the hardest parts of healing from narcissistic abuse is at times you kind of do have to walk towards the pain to understand it's going to get you to the other side. But there's a lot of trust and faith that's required in that process. Another piece of this that becomes essential, and this is where actually I have this rare opportunity. I'm going to be giving a lecture in North Carolina to a group of clinicians, to therapists, specifically on adverse childhood experiences. So I've spent about 6 weeks researching this really, really carefully, and it's taken me to some really interesting areas of the literature. One of the things that really came out from this is that one of the most important things we can do when we've been betrayed, and the thing we often don't do, is to talk about it. And why is talking about it essential? Because it gives it what we can call form. I'm watching the time, so I'm yammering on. You might be like, get to it, but I'm getting. But when we talk about it, we give it form. And the more we talk about it, and we basically do what's called creating a coherent narrative, which is a really fancy way of making sense of it and putting it together to say, whoa, like my parent was actually really abusive. Those things they did were not okay. And because they did those things, I'm X, Y, and Z, and this has affected me this way. That's a coherent narrative, right? It's a painful narrative and it's uncomfortable narrative, but here's where it gets really interesting. And I found this to be one of the most compelling. It's an old study, I think from the 80s, probably mid 80s. And I actually read it. I read the article after it in graduate school. And so it was interesting to revisit it now, having done this work. And one thing they found was that, and this is specifically because it was more, the research was focused on mothers at that time, but what they were talking about in this case was when the daughters of abusive mothers, but largely narcissistic mothers, were able to hold a coherent narrative about what happened to them, they were almost completely unlikely to do any harm to their kids. So we always talk about intergenerational. I'm going to hurt my kids because I went through this. If we can hold a coherent narrative, it means we are less likely to do that to our kids because we get it now, right? But the people who don't have a coherent narrative, who may still be very trauma bonded and not see clearly what happened, will be likely to repeat it. I don't see any reason why we can't bring that line of thought into how we even think about adult betrayals. We've got to talk about it so we can make sense of, instead of like, oh, stuff happens in a marriage, like the People magazine of it all, but instead say, whoa, this person betrayed my trust. I'm having a hard time. I feel things in my body when I feel like things are not, there feels like a trust is not, I'm not safe. It's not okay. And having a coherent narrative about that would actually probably put us in a position of A, managing ourselves in ongoing relationships, and B, making better choices. That's why it's so important for you. Instead of minimizing it and saying, well, maybe I'm the problem. Let's go back to the original premise. When you are betrayed, this is you are not the causer of your betrayal. Nobody has caused their own betrayal. You've got to keep coming back. You've got it's almost like that's a what do you call, signpost. You've got to be able to come back to. All right. So betrayal and narcissism, because they go together. Now, not every betrayal is in a narcissistic relationship. I'm going to own that. It's convenient to say, oh, all betrayers are narcissistic. All narcissistic people betray. Not all betrayers are narcissistic. We'll get into, for example, a great example would be people who are addicts often betray. They betray, they lie, they steal money. I'm going to change. I'm going to meetings. I'm not drinking anymore. All that stuff. Addiction is also where we see betrayal. Keep in mind, addiction and narcissism, 60% overlap. So why is betrayal something that's so core to narcissistic relationships? First of all, that narcissistic people, like I said in the beginning, there's no forms we exchange. There's no informed consent. They are engaging in the relationship with you with an entirely different rule book, right? So in an adult relationship, you might say, I believe in trust, and I believe in reciprocity, and I believe in empathy, and I believe in second chances. Great, healthy stuff. If it's a healthy relationship. They believe in the world rotating around them. They believe in power. They believe in domination. They need their supply, but they're not aware of any of that, right? So the two of you are in a relationship that's playing by two different rules. A child is looking to the parent for unconditional love and to be seen and to be held and to be cherished and to be heard. The parent, narcissistic parent, views the child as an inconvenience, as a difficulty, as a problem to be solved, as they personalize that when the kid is just being a kid, like, why are you doing this to me? Classical narcissistic parent languaging. Then the key traits of narcissism: lack of empathy and entitlement and arrogance and the incapacity to take perspective of other people and the self-centeredness, the selfishness, the lack of consideration of consequences, or that grandiose sense that they can get away with anything. They're so clever, they're never going to get caught in their cheat, in their lie, in any of it. They're also narcissistic folks are sensation seeking and they're very impulsive. Okay. Narcissistic folks, because they need validation and admiration above all else, they will trade on your secrets. If sharing your secret will get them more attention at a dinner party and they really want that attention, they will do that. They lie to protect themselves. Anytime they can tell a lie, they will tell a lie to protect themselves. They have very little regard for how they're lying and any of their behavior. That, again, the betrayal is all a big manipulation for them. It's to get their needs met, because that's what they're doing, right? They cheat to get their needs met. They cheat to get validation. They lie to make themselves continue to look good to the world, right? That's singularly what's motivating them, right? They will lie to protect themselves without any consideration for this isn't cool because this is going to hurt this other person. When you don't have empathy, it's a lot easier to lie. And there's also, you can't talk about it. Where it gets interesting is in relationships where betrayal is starting to enter the room, okay? Let's say it's even a person who's kind of healthy and is kind of getting into a betray space. If it's a healthy-ish enough relationship, I mean, you'd say, how can that happen in a healthy relationship? It can happen, but then there can be a conversation like, I'm uncomfortable with something that's happened. Have you ever tried that with a narcissist? Good luck with that, because if you were to say, this is uncomfortable, this is not okay, you're hurting me, what are you going to be met with? Gaslighting, rage. They don't take responsibility. And so I know some of you who probably have people who are also living with addiction in your family saying, well, this is all happening there too. It is. They're very overlapping dynamics, which is why clinically it's actually hard for us to tease this out. So then this begs the question, what did betrayal do to you? Okay. And I'm sure all of you are thinking like, well, let me tell you what it did to me. It was not good. There's shock, there's loss and grief, tremendous grief, because what you thought was to be true is not true. And you're probably going to lose something. And maybe you don't lose the relationship because you don't choose to end it. They don't leave, whatever it may be. But what you've lost, and it's a huge loss, is the sense that you were in a trusting relationship. That doesn't come back. And I'm sick and tired of saying we can clean the slate. You can't clean any damn slate. After a betrayal, you've now taken a right turn on the trail. You might stay on the trail, but it's a different one than you were on, because that original trail was based on trust. And now that's not there anymore. And the world will never look the same. Not only in that relationship, in some ways it changes us. Each time it's a tiny loss of innocence, right? There can also be a morbid preoccupation. I know when I went through relationships where I was cheated on, it filled up all my real estate. Like instead of working, I was sitting like, okay, wait, that night I was here, they were there. But I mean, you were just like pulling out calendars. You were like Perry Mason, like researching dates. You feel like a crazy person and you're pulling your energy out of your life and what matters to you. You have very damaged self-esteem. Every betrayed person invariably wonders, what was it about me? Or maybe I didn't do this, or can I really say it's fully them? Yeah, you can. They betrayed. That was a choice. There's self-doubt. There's a sense of maybe I wasn't enough. That's why they did this. Betrayers betray because of them. It's not us. It's a very hard thing. It's not you. It's a very hard thing to get our heads around, but the self-doubting is a major part of the fallout. And there's anger, good, love the anger. I love me some anger in survivors. And it's not unusual for betrayal to change us in permanent ways. It can change our relationship with trust. Some people don't feel comfortable getting into relationships again. Some people will say, listen, I wasn't able to build out my career in the same way because I didn't trust people. So it can erode you in so many different ways. Rumination is a key element of this, right? Because we play it out. How did this happen? When did this happen? When I was there, were they actually there? Is that what they were doing on their phone that night? Like you're on and on thinking about like, how could they? Or now you might have your own kids and say, oh my gosh, like this is what my parent did to me. Like, how did they even think this was okay? The rumination around betrayal is probably rumination is a key part of the fallout of narcissistic abuse. We know that, but I think it really gets amped up and amplified when we're talking about the fallout of narcissistic relationships. Obviously, there's tremendous grief because now we've lost so much. We've lost trust. We've lost faith. We've lost safety. We've even lost a sense of now what? Now what happens in my life, especially if the relationship is going to be changed in a significant way. And again, there's what I call sort of betrayal contagion. We then start losing trust in everything, right? I'm a classical example of that, where I double check things like, I mean, really, it feels like low grade OCD in my case, like, because I don't trust. And when something happens that upends my trust again, I go right back to baseline, and all my stuff, my symptomatology, call it what you will, becomes worse, because there have been enough of those betrayals of trust that I just don't trust people. And so it is, and now for many people who go through that betrayal contagion, your mindset becomes, well, everyone cheats in relationships, or everyone lies. I'm not going to trust anyone. You can see how that closes us off from the world. And then there's what I call sort of, for lack of a better term, I'm making this up, is the betrayal reversal. And the betrayal reversal is where a lot of you are enduring a lot of harm. And what I mean by that is, when we start to believe, you start to believe, I'm the one who's doing a bad thing by leaving the relationship, confronting them about it, yelling at them about it, saying, I am never talking to you again about it, not trusting them, not accepting the olive branch, the Hoovery olive branch that they try to sort of pass to us, right? Now we flip it. I'm the bad person. I'm doing a bad thing. I'm the one who's petty. I'm the one who's closed off. So you've been betrayed. Okay. You're the one who's been betrayed. And now the inner battle is, maybe I'm not good. And you feel guilty, and you feel pity, and you feel like maybe I'm unforgiving. And how many of you have been told you are unforgiving, when we know forgiving a person who's a repeat betrayer is actually harmful to you? Read the book. There's a whole section on that. I'm tired of survivors of these relationships who get repeatedly betrayed, repeatedly being told to forgive. That's a personal choice. And if you keep forgiving someone who harms you, it's bad for your mental health. So when we get into this betrayal reversal, you feel as though you did the bad thing. You're the bad one. So it's things like, I blew up the family. I'm the one who asked for a divorce. I'm the one who screwed it up for the kids, who now have to go back and forth between two houses. You're the bad one, right? That's right, because you blew everything up. We conveniently forget that you didn't just do that for kicks. You did that because you were betrayed and you no longer felt safe. And if I have to say this till I'm 110 years old, I'm going to repeat this. You didn't do the betraying. Okay. So this takes us to that place of moral injury. And in moral injury is the idea that although you were committed to doing a good thing, you feel like you've done a bad thing. We see this in law enforcement, in soldiers. We see it in healthcare workers. We saw it during COVID. At the beginning of COVID, healthcare workers had moral injury because they couldn't help patients, right? We feel as though we're the bad one. I'm disloyal for thinking that my mother is a terrible, or my father is a terrible person. I'm disloyal because I think my grandfather is this. I am disloyal for walking away from a 30-year relationship. I am being rigid. I could have taken their olive branch. I could have taken their call. I blew up the family. All those, it's me. I blew up them getting that proposal out at work because I wasn't going to put up with that betrayal, but now I screwed it up for everyone else. That's that sense of moral injury. And what it does is it takes the self-blame, which is, narcissistic abuse 101, what happens is, and it blows it up into something that we experience at the level of almost post-traumatic stress. It's that severe in effect. And if the moral injury, if the betrayal reversal, as it were, becomes too big, we often will, to lose that feeling, we might give them a second chance. Okay, let's try again. Let's revisit this. Let's do this. So might be able to turn the volume down on we did the wrong thing, but guess what's going to happen? They're going to betray you again. So now guess what you get to feel? Foolish. I went back in. So maybe I'm foolish and this is my fault again. You see how this cycle is endless. We've got to house responsibility in the people who are doing the bad things. In a parental relationship, many people feel as though many people feel as though you yourself might have betrayed the parent as a child. So children were told, you're selfish, you're greedy, you ask so much of me. Why do you behave like that? You're making my life so much more difficult. Like the child is really told, it's a total role reversal. The narcissistic parent is preoccupied with themselves, preoccupied with their own distress. And when the child is simply being a child, they're basically told they're betraying the parent, right? But that entire gambit, that entire motion is the narcissistic parent betraying the child. So your initial close relationship was characterized by betrayal. And then the different kinds of partner betrayal are all the different kinds of betrayal we've talked about. But we also can't forget about workplace betrayal. In the workplace, you can have your ideas stolen. You can have a business partner walk away with the money or steal the idea. You can be subjected to smear campaigns. You can have essential information be kept from you, so you're not even able to make informed decisions, and then the boom falls on you. You can have a supervisor or someone else in the workplace harass you, coerce you, or even worse. You can have opportunities held back from you. So you could be then, you might have been doing a fantastic job, but the opportunity for you to go up is held back from you because you're helping the narcissistic person so much. Why would they let go of you? You can also feel betrayed by the enablers, who might be the ones who say, oh, just forgive, give him a second chance, and allow yourself to feel that betrayal. You might be able to identify that the betrayals are all, the enablers are also part of a trauma bonded system, and you might find some compassion for them, but also allow yourself to identify that betrayal for what it is. It doesn't mean you live in it, but it might allow you to sort of experience why there was some, again, a loss of safety and a sense of harm in those relationships. But when we're betrayed, frankly, we disconnect from ourselves. We end up abandoning ourselves at those times because we often quickly don't want to see it, and we disconnect from our feelings, our beliefs, our values. And then there's also that sense of, and a couple things I want to last say, because I know I want to share a couple of other things before we end. We feel like we've betrayed ourselves instead of seeing that they betrayed us. And there's also this issue of injustice, right? Again, too bigger than I can get into here. By definition, narcissistic relationships are unjust. Judith Herman last year wrote a phenomenal book on trauma and healing and injustice, and how much lack of justice can really impede our healing from trauma. Frankly, I think it impacts significantly our capacity to come back from betrayal. Listen, in the ideal story, the person who betrays you can go off with their new person, and that relationship blows up because the new person cheats on them. How good would that feel, by the way? And we actually get healthy, right? And that's what we want. It's not always what happens, or by the time it does happen, that new relationship blows up, and it invariably blows up. So many years might have passed that you have healed, but golly, it would have felt good if that happened initially. But it can feel painful when the family or friends or someone is even backing up, like they're like staying friends with the narcissistic person. That's a betrayal too. So these are not single betrayals, right? These are double, triple, quadruple betrayals. It's never just one. There's a whole system of secondary betrayals that builds around this, right? So let me leave you with a couple of things you can do. You're like, oh my gosh, you're thinking, oh my God, this is gonna be the most depressing Saturday of my life. Not. Because there are things you can do, even when it feels unjust, because the justice here is you are going to heal. But if we make the story about them, is there ever going to be justice? Aren't they going to have to face a consequence? Not really. Life's not fair in that way, but let's stop making it about them. Healing means like, I got to figure me out. They're going to do what they're going to do. You can set a clock that they're going to blow up the next thing too. That's what they do. They blow up stuff, right? They're human dynamite. Yes, they'll find a new person to prey on. Someone one day, it's going to, in its fashion, or they're just going to be the miserable people they are. But what can you do? Number one, keep having that coherent narrative. Allow yourself to create the schema of this. That's not, I'm a bad person, but whoa, this person did this, this, and this, and I experienced it like this. And this is how it affected me. Coherent. Whether you write it down, whether you talk about it in therapy, this is a lot of the work I do with my clients that I've done in the past with them, is we create coherent narratives, even if it takes months. So allow for that coherent narrative to emerge some way, somehow. See what narcissism is clearly, see what betrayal is clearly. It's them doing something. Again, we're going to come back to this. I'm not a person. I mean, maybe I'll get a necklace made. You are not responsible for the betrayal. It's a very long necklace. It ended up covering my whole front. But I know I'm saying you're not responsible for someone else's betraying behavior. You can share it. Betrayal and the harm it does to us really, really festers in the dark. I know we can't always talk about it. We can't always go in front of a group of people, and maybe the betrayer is still alive and other people will be harmed if we share it. but find the spaces you can share it safely, or even intimate it without giving all the details up. But even simply letting people know, I have been fundamentally betrayed. I see that. And when I've had people do that in my presence, it actually helped me feel more human and less, I guess, damaged. Write about it. I'm a big fan of journaling. Those of you in my healing community, I'm all about the journaling. Care for yourself. A lot of us don't get to get rid of the betrayers. We have to see them at holidays and weddings and work. You have to take care of you at that point more than you usually do. I don't care if that means a little more sleep, if that means better nutrition, if that means breathing, if that means exercising, if that means pleasant distractions, talking with friends, but doing it intentionally, like, all right, I'm going to have to take care of myself if I'm going to have to be in this particular situation. Be aware that if a narcissist betrays you, they're going to do it again. Why? Not to depress you, because number one, I don't want you to keep being surprised. What? They did that again? Instead of, okay, here we go again. Because when you're surprised, you're more likely to pivot back to self-blame and you feel foolish. But if you engage with them knowing, like, this person's going to betray me again, so I'm going to make, if, for example, if I lived in a place where my window's getting broken every day, at some point I'm going to put bars on the windows, or I'm going to put an alarm system on my house, right? Because this is going to happen again. And when it happens, you'll be like, okay, I got to replace the window again. That sucks. It does suck. But we're trying to eliminate that surprise. If you can access therapy, especially in the case of more severe betrayals, therapy is absolutely essential. And you got to focus on you. Stop making the story about they did this and they did that. Yes, we know, and they're going to keep doing it. How has this affected you? What has been the impact on you? And how can we break you out of that self-blame cycle? Okay. So now I'm going to share something with you, because I'm going to share something with you, because I've kind of got a treat, because what we're talking about is, above all else, I've been telling you today, I've been betrayed. It was actually kind of awful preparing this, because let me write down all my betrayals. And then after I cried a lot and had my own sort of awful reaction, I was like, wow, this has really messed me up. I see that. I've come past it, but I also know where some of the permanent scars are. It's happened, and I'm sure many of you who are listening today. So hearing the stories of others really, really matters. So I'm going to open something up here, which I did not do properly. Anyone who knows me knows that when it comes to Zoom, PhD be damned, I'm really, really bad at negotiating this. But I want to share something with you, and I'm hoping I open the correct file, which I probably won't. Okay, here we go. Zoom, and then we're going to share, and then there it is. We're going to share that. Here we go. So here's what I want to share with you. All right. I hope you found this useful. I hope you found this helpful. I hope you found this validating. And ultimately, the thing we have to remember is that we do need to hear some more stories from survivors. So let me do one other thing here, because it's going to allow me to do something I need to do. There we go. Perfect. And then I'm going to open one other thing here. I think. All right. I'm not going to be able to do everything I want to do here. So, we need to hear more stories from survivors. Okay. So I'm again, I am trying, I'm encouraging you to pre-order the book. So I'm going to incentivize that if you haven't already. If you already have, you're about to get something really sweet. I had the opportunity in December and all the way through January to interview multiple people in the field who not only know about betrayal, but who know about everything from meeting new people to working through grief to how the toxic enablers in our world work. So I have a speaker series, 9 interviews, that is launching today, that's called Healing and Thriving After Narcissistic Abuse, the Many Voices. It's like a choir of voices coming together. And these conversations take on everything: complex trauma, and the specific complex trauma that comes out of narcissistic abuse, with a focus on the fawn response, our need to appease and please and be what the narcissistic person wants. The sense of betrayal, phenomenal conversation with Jen Faison about that, how you heal from that. Toxic positivity, Whitney Goodman, love her work. So great conversation about how that relates to narcissism. There's going to be many more. I'm kind of teasing you. Once you get this package, you have it always. It's not something that's going to disappear. 9 interviews, 9 hours of content. And from every interviewee that I talk with, a list of resources from them. So whether you're interested in cults, whether you're interested in toxic positivity, whatever you're interested in, each of these people has created so much, and you can go connect to their stuff. So how do you get this? You can either pay for it, $225, which is a bargain, or you can get it free. All you need to do is pre-order a hard copy or the ebook. Hard copy or ebook. Audiobooks don't count on this promotion, but hard copy or ebook. You can get it. Actually, some sellers are even selling it lower. Some days I see it for 20, some days it's 26. It's better than 225. Okay. So you can walk into your local bookstore, go to Barnes and Noble, whatever. Let's mix it up. Let's not give Amazon all the love here. And the prices are going to vary, but you do what works for you. This deal ends on February 23rd. So you got some time. All right. So listen, this series, we're going to put it up. We'll put it up for sale after the 23rd for $225. It is, again, 9 hours of content. Me taking people who ordinarily don't talk about narcissism and bringing the conversation back to narcissism in very, very different ways. If you have already pre-ordered, and this is the best part, if you've already pre-ordered, you're going to get access to this. And so my team will also be dropping into the Q&A some of the details here. If you pre-order, again, you got to do it by the 23rd of February. Do not reach out to us on the 24th. And here's the thing, it's not even pre-ordering. If you buy the book on the 20th, you got the book then. It's no longer pre-ordered. You can walk into a store. My team will put in the Q&A how you're going to give us proof of that sale. By doing this, by getting the book, whether it's pre-order or walking into a store on the 20th of February and buying it with pride in your stride, because you are no longer going to be betrayed, if you order it, now obviously if you after the 20th, you're not going to be that interested in chapter 2. If you order it before the 20th, you'll get a flavor for the book. You get chapter 2 of the book before it comes out. A 5-hour course on healing from gaslighting. Some of you have already gotten it. I hope you like that, but I think it's almost 6 hours on gaslighting. You get an exclusive Facebook group that's all related to the pre-launch for people to share, especially after the book comes out, your thoughts about it, your feelings about it. We're going to be making a reading guide available so you can sort of do a deeper dive with it. You can even use journal prompts alongside the book to really make the book come alive. You can get all this stuff. All you need to do is get the book. So all you have to do to get your 100% off the night, it's not 50% off. You get the book, done. You get the whole series and conversations again about everything related to narcissistic relationships, including betrayal. Pre-order a hard copy or an ebook or buy it. Again, after the 20th, you'll be buying it. And you can use any retailer, and you can see the links in the comments or below, whatever that means. I think my team's put it in the chat. You have to fill out the pre-order verification form. Just take a look at the notes and we'll send you 100% off coupon within 12 hours, and you'll just be able to get the interview series. We've been working on it for months. And then you enter your coupon code at checkout and you set up your account. No credit card, nothing. There's no financial obligation to us. All we need is that information. And then once we get that, it's yours. And I hope you enjoy. Those of you really interested, want to do the deep dive, come over to the healing program. But all you have to do is these steps. And if you've already ordered, you're like, I've already done this. Great. Just, my team we'll talk about what happens with those who've already verified pre-order. I'm not sure the answer to that. So they're going to put that information in the chat or the Q&A. So again, I really am proud of this series. These were, every time I was like, oh gosh, we didn't have enough to talk about narcissism. And every time I was like, ooh, it's been over an hour. I better stop. Each of the expertise here, you are never going to get this all in one place. Never have this kind of constellation of experts. And the beauty of it is you can almost treat it as a podcast. You can throw it on your headphones. You can listen to it while you're walking. It goes beyond me talking about narcissism. It really rounds it out with what other people who know a lot about this bring to the conversation, which I think really magnifies this conversation. And you may hear things from them that are very, very unique to your healing. So that's what we're bringing to you. I want to, again, I'm just going to make sure that I'm looking at all this the right way. Let me just open it up. Give me 1 second. If you have questions, I'm going to keep this open for a while. And some of you did send in questions, which I actually did. I wrote some of them down here, which I can't see this other screen. That's what angers me.
You can turn off the slides if you want to look at it.
Okay, great. Awesome. Because I'm going to look at that because I want to look at a couple of things I wrote here, folks, and hopefully you don't see my wacky notes. Let's see. Great. I'm going to open that. I'm going to open up this other document. Okay. So again, I think that that listening to this series is going to round out. It's so great. Like, I'm so happy about it. It's actually, in some ways, it's more intimate than some of even the podcast episodes. Cause some of these people I was meeting kind of for the first time, a lot of them are old friends. So you're watching, it's almost like you're watching that we got coffee together and you kind of dipped into our conversation. But some of these folks, like I said, include Jen Faison, who knows so much about betrayal, Dr. Ingrid Clayton, many of you know her work on the fawn response and narcissistic abuse. It's just wonderful. And so many people resonate with it. She's a survivor. Jen's a survivor. Tina Swithin, if you're going through a narcissistic divorce, you know she is the last word on that. So Tina will be part of it. Tina's a good friend of mine. Tina's a survivor. Mark Vicente talking about his experience in a cult, survivor. Dr. Yanya Lalich, who is one of the premier cult experts. Any of you who watched Twin Flames, she was in that documentary, also a survivor. Kimberly Shannon Murphy, who wrote the most extraordinary memoir of surviving from familial severe trauma within her family, Glimmer. Check out her book, but also she's a survivor, and what she talks about in terms of that kind of survivorship and what happens when a family turns away from somebody who's been abused within a family system. Matthew Hussey, who is one of my dearest friends. When him and I are in the room, I always think it's antimatter because he's all love and I'm all narcissism. And I'm always convinced the world is going to end, but somehow we figure out a way to keep the conversation going. Wonderful stuff about how do we bring ourselves into new relationships after narcissistic abuse. Also a survivor. Whitney Goodman, I'm not so sure she is a survivor, but she was smart as hell. And her stuff on toxic positivity is absolutely astonishing because we're in a world like feel better, think differently, la 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 la, da 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 da. But you know what? With Whitney, she really brings it into all this stuff. The toxic positivity stuff is such a heavy burden that narcissistic abuse survivors take on, all that forgiveness stuff. So that's a great conversation. It was the first time I'd ever met her. I'd read her stuff. So it was such a privilege to get to know that. But there's others in the package that you will have to get the package. Just order the book and you'll see it. And they're amazing conversations. It's going to be fantastic. And then, like I said, it's easy to get it. Many of you are already going to get it because you've already gotten the book. Bless your hearts. The deal ends, like I said, on February 23rd. Only hard copies and ebooks. We can't do the audiobook as part of this at this time, but you can get both, I guess. You're going to get a lot out of this book. And some of you may focus on Tina's episode on divorce because that's what you're going through. Some of you might have been encountering cultic system. So the conversations on that, some of you might have been through infidelity. So there's different things here. Again, we're going to sell this for $225 after, afterwards, but now you can get it. And you can, again, all you need to do, pre-order it. How do you get it? You pre-order it, you fill out the form. My team will be answering questions for a while about this. Enter that coupon code. We don't need your credit card. We don't need nothing from you. You're not giving us money. You're just getting a book. So them's the fundamentals. And I'm going to use this as a moment here because my team will be on here for a while answering questions because I don't want to just disappear. I'd love for you to be able to ask your questions now. And I'm going to talk. I noticed a few people sent in questions in advance and I was reading my email this morning and I want to get to some of those. One of you asked, what are my thoughts on the people who switch over to the ex after the ex betrayed you? Remember what I was talking about, double and triple betrayals. This makes the process of healing harder for you. What are my thoughts on those people? Enablers, emboldeners, low-grade narcissistic folks, maybe themselves, opportunists, people who are willing to listen to the narcissistic person's distorted narrative. All of those are possible. There's some of them might be naive, thinking they can play it both ways. Some of them could be bought off, and maybe the narcissistic person offers them more luxe experiences. Whatever it is, it undercuts your sense of trust. I've been there, and it just should have changed it's not that I disliked them, but I certainly didn't. There was definitely a lot more remoteness between them. And depending on the nature of your relationship with your ex, in some cases, this is just sort of that painful wake-up call that this isn't just about losing one relationship. This may end up being about losing many. Someone also brought up a question about someone in the family. It was living with addiction. A lot of the patterns in this person also seem to overlap with narcissism. Lots of lying, lots of deceit, lots of, promising to change, get into 12-step, whatever. But this person was also going to ask them to leave their home, like get out of my house. And for many of you who know, that might mean that they end up living in the streets, they end up living in unsafe places. So at what point, though, are you putting yourself in a are you putting yourself in a position of a complete loss of safety, and then a person doesn't take responsibility? It's one of the most painful decisions that families of addicts go through. For a person going through that, certainly something like Al-Anon or some other support group for family members of addicts becomes crucial, so you can see you're not alone, and you can see the unbelievably painful decisions that other people have had to make in this circumstance. But that guilt, you got to remember that guilt, sadness we feel, it's also a signal of something in you that's still working. It's like our compassion and our empathy, but it's gone like a little bit, like it's also this sense of we've been programmed to believe that if we don't give ourselves up, we're not doing love right. That we have to change that distorted narrative. But the compassion and empathy pieces are working because you feel like, I don't want to do this to someone. It's understanding the difference that you still can have compassion and empathy, but also recognize the longer you just make it possible for this person to not get help, they're not going to get help. And ultimately, that might be their demise. That's the challenge, especially when it's addiction or narcissism or the two together. Someone also asked the question about what about the kinds of betrayal techniques that a person can use in a divorce against me? This person's going through a divorce with a narcissistic person. I don't know enough about their case, but I can tell you that some of it is, don't be surprised if the narcissistic person pulls out really inappropriate information about you from the past. Who knows? You might have been sexually experimental in your marriage consensually. And then all of a sudden now they're pulling out images and sharing them with an attorney saying, hey, like this person, you really think you could trust a person, or this person with a child? Or they'll pull one picture of you on Facebook having a one evening out with friends, and you're sort of holding up a martini or a glass of wine, and they're trying to imply that you're a drinker. Like that's the kind of betrayal that could happen, either sharing confidences, twisting information, portraying you in a way that is completely untrue. And sometimes it'll be obviously financial malfeasance, how they'll move money, fool around with accounts. Again, I don't know what this person's story is. You have to plan on betrayal when you go through a narcissistic divorce. It's not like it might happen. It will happen. Because like I said, the definition of betrayal isn't just the big ticket stuff. So I'm going to climb into the Q&A here while y'all are asking questions of the team. Oh my goodness, look at all your questions. So many. Okay, here we go. And hopefully you have lots of questions for the team. So I'm going to do this for a little while. Why not? Let's do it. So we've talked a little bit about how to betray it a bit. Is it possible to completely heal after a long-term 5-year relationship with a narcissist? So let's be clear on what we mean about completely heal, right? I think what some people, I don't want the confusion to be, I'm just going to go back to how everything was. Probably not, because in fact, I want you to go into something better than was, because this relationship has taken a lot from you. And many times we're not always in our best selves when we got to these relationships, and the narcissistic folks played on that. Sometimes we were, and it means getting back to that. But these relationships, especially when there's betrayal, they do undercut trust. So I absolutely think we can heal and in fact become better. But the way we may go through the world, discernment, maybe a little cynical, definitely not as trusting, a lot more careful. I always say it's like the cat walking on an unfamiliar surface. When I watch my cat do that, the tentativeness of that, I always smile now. I'm like, there she is. She's being discerning, right? Because she doesn't want to go crashing. She doesn't know what's under that. And she's very careful. Whereas once upon a time, maybe she would just run on that and fallen down or something. So it absolutely, listen, I'm going to tell you, the person asking this question, I've seen people make significant strides in healing 40 years into a narcissistic relationship. 5 years, you're going to do it. Doesn't mean 5 years, 40 years, 60 years, 2 years, 6 months. It's possible. But it often means having to plumb the depths of our souls in a way where like, whoa, there was a lot of stuff in there. And the narcissistic person played on that stuff. Let's see. What does it take for a narcissistic person to finally leave? Feeding into his needs doesn't seem to work. No, it's hard, y'all, because narcissistic people can quite often have anxious attachments, right? They really can. And because of those anxious attachments, the avoidant attachments, all of that, because of all of that, they are, they often don't want to leave. They have big abandonment wounds. It really, it's strangely enough. And instead of having vulnerable abandonment wounds, they have angry abandonment wounds. So I'm telling you now, they don't leave a lot. And you can try to gray rock them into oblivion, and you just might be living in a very gray rocky life. They often don't go. So if that's what you're waiting for, you could end up waiting a lifetime. And I've seen people wait a lifetime, or they just wait for, I guess they hope the narcissistic person will pass away before they do. So if that's the way you want to do it, then do it. But if that's not the way you want to do it, I would say the key for healing for you is allowing yourself to create an individuated, moderately autonomous existence and no longer reference yourself against that person. Understand how it affects you. Don't be surprised by them anymore. All of those things, recognizing that it won't change, but trying to think that they're going to leave. No, sometimes we have to be the one to do that. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Let's, where can a person as myself who believes he's narcissistic get help? All right. Please get the help. A therapist who's trauma informed is a great place to start. But I'm going to tell you, if anyone in today's workshop says like, I watched this and I actually think I'm narcissistic, that's a big step. Now, there's two ways this can go. There's some people who think they're narcissistic because they were told by the narcissistic people they were. That's one path. And I've met many a client come in, I'm like, whoa, okay, that's not what's happening. And there's a group of folks who might be here today. They're like, well, I've done really bad things to people, or I've behaved badly, and I don't want to be this person anymore. Delve into your childhood. Ask yourself what that looked like. If there was trauma, neglect, adversity, attachment disruptions, work with a therapist, ideally a trauma-informed one. This is going to be a long path, though. This is a commitment to being better, to understanding that there's two sets of people in a relationship that have needs, that sometimes life is going to be frustrating, and you've got to find mindful ways to respond. We always don't get to respond the way we want. We don't get to throw tantrums the way we want, even though we may want to. We have to throw a tantrum inside our head, I suppose. We have to learn to regulate. This can be years and a lifetime of every time we're talking to someone, always making sure we're touching in with ourselves, we're self-aware, we're aware of how we affect others. And then you could be that unicorn. It's just work. It's work, and it's hard, vulnerable work. Interesting. The person here says the word I think of when I hear the word betrayal is husband. And this, again, those of you who, if you watch Betrayal, listen to Betrayal, listen to Jen Faison's interview. To move through what the betrayer was willing to do for the affair partner. This is an interesting question. So can we move through what the betrayer was willing to do for the affair partner that to this very moment isn't willing to put that amount of effort into repairing the damage she caused in the relationship? It's like, I wrote the playbook over the years for her to please him. He was worth the effort, but I'm not. That's a really interesting question. So, and a very, very specific kind of interesting form of betrayal. So to frame out what this person's saying, that you see the narcissistic partner in this case treating, and you come to learn that they've treated this person they're having an affair with what actually looks like healthy behaviors, empathy and consideration, and they're not punitive. It's as though, like this person said, it's like they were treating the affair partner the way I treated them, as though they learned from me. Ultimately, folks, when narcissistic people cheat, it's for supply, whatever that supply is to them: admiration, validation, sensation seeking, excitement, power, control, even that like sort of tricky sense of getting away with something, right? So that sort of seeming A game that they're bringing to that relationship, number one, I would bet the farm on the fact that if this person made a long-term relationship with this new person, the same patterns are going to show up. And narcissistic betrayers tend to leapfrog. They do this stuff repeatedly. It's always looking for the new supply. New supply is always more interesting than old supply. It's like everybody wants a new dress. The old dress is fine, but the new dress is exciting, right? So I really think that that's a very interesting observation. It's again, double, triple betrayals, right? Not only has this person cheated on you, you're seeing them showing up with this new partner in a way that they never maybe did with you or ceased to. So the moving through is, number one, is radically knowing, accepting this will go off the skids with this new person. The challenge is it may take a minute, and you can't put your healing on ice. And I'll tell you this too, they did not, they weren't paying attention to your playbook. It wasn't that. I know it feels like that, like, wait a minute, they're doing all this nice stuff I did. They weren't, that's not it. They might have picked up techniques like, oh, that's an interesting thing to do, but it's not, they're not attuned enough to a partner at any given time. So they're just showing up as a decent person. I'm so sorry, because that's an incredible painful loss. And I think any of us who've been betrayed has seen that happen. But it's basically the most painful thing about a narcissistic betrayal is that you sometimes now have to witness them love bomb the new person. Let's see. I'm also keeping an eye on the time, but because I don't want to yammer on, but I guess those of you who don't want to be here can leave, right?
I think it's good to keep going for a little while.
Okay, great. Awesome. It's like, I don't want people to think Dr. Ramani is kind of going on like a drunk in a bar. I don't even drink. So, okay, this is an interesting question. How do you respond to the gaslighting that you know is happening? I found that when you call someone out and name the fact that you notice that they're gaslighting or minimizing you, that doesn't work. What language do you suggest using? Okay, so 2 basic tenets. One day I need to write down the absolute tenets of narcissism. Maybe that'll be its own workshop down the line. I promise you, but we'll do that. I'm going to write that down because this is one of them. Never call the narcissistic person out as a narcissist. And never call gaslighting out as gaslighting, right? It's kind of calling a magician out on their trick. Magician's probably going to get mad. Maybe not mad, but they're not going to be happy about it, right? And here's where it gets even more weird than the magician example, is that it's not as active a process as you think, right? They're motivated by power, control, dominance. They're not aware of that, right? And because gaslighting is a tactic, they're not going to say, oh, you got my trick. So it's like walking up to someone playing 3-card Monte on the street. They're like, you figured out my trick, so here's the money. They're not going to do that. I mean, gaslighting at its core is a hustle, and you can't call out a hustle. So the languaging then is not, you're gaslighting me. It's depends on the nature of the gaslighting too, of course, but like sometimes, and it's annoying. This isn't what I'm going to suggest is annoying, but it's either you don't engage with it at all. That's one version of it. And when I was recently gaslighted, and I thought to myself, there's no way I can address this with this person, but I am going to file it away because it definitely changed my mental relationship with this person, which actually I thought was actually good. And this changed it. And now I'm going to be much more careful, much more calculated, a lot more stuff in writing. So that's one approach to it, right? Another approach to it is to acknowledge this is going to annoy them, and they're going to say, what did your therapist teach this to you? And why don't you just shut up? That kind of thing. But another way that this shows up is that you might say, like, they'll say, nope, that never happened. And you know what? You live in the past. And oh my gosh, with you, it's like listening to you just bring up the past all the time. And you can't even remember stuff right. So like you're just sort of a crazy person who makes up stories. And that's what they're saying to you. To which you can say, we're having really different experiences here. And they're going to they're going to do the same thing. But it is true. What you're saying is true. You are having different experiences here. They're wacky enough to be sticking in that particular narrative. It's almost delusional. And you're going to sort of, if you have to say something, you can hold your ground. Like, I just think we're having different experiences, or I didn't have that experience. By using words like experience, you're keeping it in a subjective reality. You're reinforcing your subjective reality. And they're going to say, childish things like your experience sucks, or who cares about your experience? And there's be a little bit of shrugging. And some people say, oh, you're stonewalling. You're not stonewalling. If someone's gaslighting you, walking away is a perfectly fine response to that, right? To me, it's like paper beats rock. Walking away is necessary in gaslighting. You just don't walk away all the time. But in that case, yes, don't engage it, keep it tight, different experiences. And that's all you can do. But it's the mental shift. Like, okay, this person is now showing me what's in their wheelhouse. I am going to communicate this differently. I'm going to approach this person differently. And that can bring up a lot of grief. But that's definitely how you sort of approach that. So this is doesn't invalidation, dismissing needs, and shaming them in gaslighting for betrayal. Yes, that's what we covered today. I hope that made more sense after we do this. So yeah, interesting. Here's one. And in fact, this might have even come up on another question. This piece of paper, no. So person saying, I have the flip of this situation. They have a covert, I'm assuming they mean maybe vulnerable narcissist or a narcissistic person who nobody else could figure out they're narcissistic. So an ex who used the children as pawns, darvoed the crap out of everything. I'm just laughing at the language. I'm not laughing at the story. Darvoing, if those of you who don't know what Darvo means, it's also from Dr. Fried's research, actually. And it's an acronym that stands for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. So it's when you, going back to that person's prior question about when you're being gaslighted, if you were to push back on them, like if, let's say you called them out on the betrayal. And in fact, I'm so glad you brought up the Darvo because I didn't mention that today. When you call a person, a betrayer out on their betrayal, invariably they will deny it happened. They will attack the person who brought the thing up. Like, I didn't do that. I wasn't with that person. And how dare you treat me like I am somebody who could cheat? Like, I can't believe I've done so much for you. I've done so much for this family. I helped you when such and such was sick. I did this. I supported you when you got your degree, and you're doing this to me. Like, I can't even believe this is happening to me. Darvo, I didn't do that. How dare you say I did? And I'm the one who's being victimized because I've done so many good things. That is the wheelhouse of the narcissistic betrayer every single time, right? She has great research showing that dark triad and narcissism are associated with Darvoing, right? So Darvo's the hell out of everything. And after I held everything above water and had a plan for a balanced family, the adult children are now blaming me for their decisions to follow his manipulative way. And I'm on the abuse train again. This is now betrayal at, like, I said double betrayal, quadruple betrayal. This is like deca betrayal. When the narcissistic person, because what happens is that narcissistic parent the co-parent gets into the kids' heads. And however that plays out, what's the one thing that they've learned by being around that parent is how to shift blame. And they've been affected by that. And so now this person is being abused by the adult children who are blaming this person, again, kind of going through a Darvo experience again, for their decisions to follow his manipulative ways. I've said this recently in an interview, and I'm going to say it here again. We don't talk enough about the effects of abusive adult narcissistic children on parents. Parents at some level will always feel some moral injury. They will always feel that sort of betrayal reversal because they will say, at some level, I was there, right? And whether it was I simply made a bad choice in who I had these kids with, or I was so overwhelmed by the narcissistic co-partner, I wasn't as present as I wanted to be, whatever it may be, almost every single parent who goes through this takes in some of that sense of, I did the wrong thing. I'm the person, again, that moral injury piece. So this is when I hear stories like this, situations like this, I can't reiterate therapy enough. Like, this is something I can't Q&A away. I can acknowledge it. I can validate it, say it's a nightmare that we don't talk enough about this. And the tough thing with with children, right? Some of you have siblings who are narcissistic and you're not. So we also know that in one family, that temperament of the child comes up against the narcissism of the parent, the nature of the environment, and all of that. And those things kind of mix up, if you will, right? And when that happens, what we tend to see is that we see a Some kids no kid gets out of a narcissistic parent unscathed. I'm telling you that right now. There's no version of, I had a narcissistic parent. I'm very self-assured and I know exactly who I am. I know who my values are and I'm willing to exert myself. What we do know is it only takes one healthy parent, right? That research is very clear there, that if a child has a secure attachment to one parent and that child has a temperament that can make that work, you can end up with a phenomenally well put together adult that still has some self-esteem issues and self-worth issues and some anxiety. No one's getting out without that. We can still have a secure attachment depending on what the other parent was like. But some of those kids have tougher temperaments. And when those, so in your family, some of you who have siblings who are narcissistic, but you're very agreeable, they had a different temperament. And I bet if you could remember, if they are younger than you and you can remember their babyhood or people told you about it, they probably were described potentially as a more difficult kid and than you. So we know that in one family, it can look different. And in this particular case is that the impact of the narcissistic parent can be quite different. And now they're turning around and blaming this person. The key is, again, therapy to break out of any self-blame cycle, because there is a point at which the adult child also can take responsibility and say, okay, I'm going to seek out help. I'm going to seek out therapy. I'm going to work through this. In some cases like yours, people will get therapy with their adult child. It's trickier. You need one hell of a strong therapist in the room, but I've seen it happen and it can work.
Jumping in
Yeah.
really quick, just so you know, we've addressed pretty much all of the questions about the pre-order verification process. So if you want to
Okay.
keep asking questions, you can, but we can wrap it up soon.
Okay, I'm going to answer a couple more questions. I hate to say it, I've got to go and I've got to put some final touches on my workshop tomorrow. I'm actually doing a workshop tomorrow on meaning and purpose for survivors of narcissistic abuse. Frankly, if you want to go to that, my team can put the details on how you can attend that. But I do have to jump because I have to go get that presentation finalized. Because these questions are absolutely amazing. If there's a way for me to save these, in fact, if my team, if you can save these questions, because I really want to sit with some of these because they're very, very powerful, just to have them. I will always keep them, in a confidential file, but there's really some profound insights in here. Let's see. I want to find ones I can get to. Oh, interesting. Okay, yes. So someone making an interesting observation that abusers love to induce shame and dirtiness in their victims to increase control. Thank you for saying that. Yes, that's exactly what happens. Someone here, can you talk about the unique dynamics of familial betrayal or betrayal of relatives and why this type of betrayal is not always acknowledged or recognized? This is a great question. Familial betrayal, frankly, I'm going to argue, and this is why in that interview package that you're going to be getting, those of you who ordered the book already, Kimberly's interview, it handles this beautifully, and her book does too, but we don't talk enough about it. And yet it's the core of what even people who've been through adult narcissistic relationships will say, yeah, this also happened in my childhood. It's not unusual to have those unfortunate bookends. Familial betrayal, though, gets almost more often covered up because, especially depending on how much more collective the system you're in, the more collectivist the culture, the more likely that a lot of that familial betrayal is going to be covered up. And it gets interesting, right? We're always like individualistic cultures, everyone's out for themselves. Collectivistic cultures really protect the narcissistic abusers and within a family. It's like family has to stick together. Don't speak bad about your family. You have to be loyal. You have to have duty and obligation. So it doesn't even just have to be collectivist culture, not individualist culture. Within a culture, there are families that are simply more collectivistic. They'll bandy around the blood thicker than water stuff just to silence everyone. So I think families stick together and sort of close ranks in a way that might happen differently if you're going through this in an adult intimate relationship, especially if you have not yet built out a system of children and all of that. So why is it not always acknowledged or recognized? That's a really great part of this question. This is a real bone I've had to pick with the field of mental health for a while. There's a lot of, again, Whitney Goodman's interview in that package, you're going to love it. There's a lot of sort of push to like family estrangement is always bad. Nobody wants to be estranged from their family. No one's like, woohoo, let me go estrange. People get there from utter devastation, trying to keep themselves safe under the most impossible of circumstances. Nobody starts the process there. That is a very dire sort of end point, right? And so many times, though, when this issue comes up, the sort of knee-jerk reactions like, we have to figure out how to get this family to talk to each other again. We have to bring them together again. Maybe, or maybe not. Just because genetics rolled the dice and these people all got thrown together doesn't necessarily mean that they have to work on this. I mean, that's a very personal decision, and you're not a bad person if you don't want to do it. You're just making a decision for yourself that feels healthier or safer. So I think it's not recognized. I think of a lot of it is just sort of cultural beliefs on family. And so we call them hegemonic beliefs. Like it's just, we sort of hold on to these as though they're absolutely like almost like law, and they're not. And I think as a result, that's why this type of betrayal is not always recognized. I think trauma folks recognize it, but even then, when it even gets to some of the more subtle stuff around the invalidation and all the other stuff we see in narcissistic abuse by parents, we'll often say, yeah, we understand why it might happen in more severe cases of abuse. But listen, where there's physical or sexual abuse, there is also emotional abuse. And frankly, there's also narcissistic abuse. So this stuff all hangs together. And I think that's a lot of the reason why this is not always recognized. Okay, so I'm going to answer a couple more questions, like I said, then I got to jump. I apologize. Regarding the narrative, every time I talk about the pain and betrayal, I'm assuming this person means with the partner, I'm also faced with the same list of, well, you did all of this too. And I always walk away with not knowing if I'm the problem or more guilt. How do you overcome that? When you're sharing what you've went through, you went through those things, okay? And those things harmed you. And when we go through things, we always don't behave perfectly. That's why some of us this is another reason people get stuck in narcissistic relationships. We look back over time and we'll say, well, I yelled at them. And when they came home that night really late, I did scream at them and I did accuse them of cheating on me. And I did complain a lot. Let's move the lens out a little bit. Okay. Only you know if you showed up as a compassionate, empathic, connected person in that relationship. Only you know that, right? I'm going to put that though as an assumption here. You showed up as a decent person and sometimes you didn't behave perfectly. You also weren't under perfect circumstances. Any of us who've been through these relationships, it's like asking people about their worst day when you were just barely trying to survive or scrape by, and ask yourself how gracefully you behaved, but also ask yourself how well you tried to make amends. So if you're in a relationship where you're experiencing some things that are really problematic and betrayal laden, and this person's only response is, but you did these things too, that's a form of gaslighting because you're literally not being listened to and being told you're a terrible person too, versus, okay, let's talk about it. I am so sorry. I hurt you in those ways. I did those things. That mere acknowledgement, had that even happened once to the person asking this question, would have been a game changer. And so I think that when the betrayer hits back with, and this happens all the time when infidelity, okay, yes, sure, okay, yeah, whatever, I cheated, but you have not been affectionate with me since the baby was born. You have been so remote and distant with work. You'll get that, and you're like slow, and then it's supposed to be okay. And a great play here is, got it. Even if you have pen and paper, say, we're going to come back to that if you want. I'm bringing it back to the original premise. You keep bringing them back. They're going to lose their mind, of course, scream, gaslight, yell, and walk out. But don't let them take you off topic. Say, right now we're talking about your betrayal of my trust. But you did this, writing it down. Here's an index card. We're going to get back to it. Let's go here. They will not be able to do it. They will not. Their shame, their insecurities, their need to control the narrative, they won't let you do that. And to the person who wrote that, I hope you can do that to see they can't do that, right? You walk away knowing not that you're the problem, but you're in a problematic circumstance. And they will not take ownership of what they did. You're taking ownership of it. You're even saying, I don't always love what I did. But that's the play. That's how you approach that. Okay. Okay. I'm going to push back on this person. I can't let this one go. In Eastern philosophy, they will often see trust as expectations that can be legitimate or unrealistic and illegitimate. I therefore blame myself for placing my hopes in inappropriate people. And I blame them if they do not fulfill their negotiated share. This way, there's less room for disappointment when we discover a snake that we put our trust in was indeed just a snake. I'm going to pull back on this because I don't fully agree with it. Because what this sort of Eastern philosophical stance doesn't account for is trauma bonding. These are not just straight, simple belief structures. These aren't simply just someone, even to that person I just gave that guidance to, like, say, we're going to come back to this. The reason it's so hard is the reason trauma bonding works. We feel to blame. We feel complicit. And as long as we're complicit, we can stay in the relationship and not have to do what I just said, break the social code, break the status quo, right? So this idea that, trust is expectations. I think trust is also about safety, right? No one's ever going to be perfect. Trust can even be, you said you were coming home at 3 and you came home at 3:10. And the person's like, yeah, I'm so sorry. I did send you a text saying like the traffic is showing terrible on the GPS. I am going to be late, but I'm sorry because I did tell you I was going to be home at 3. I really am. And I hope this doesn't get us going too late to the next thing. So a person taking ownership and not saying, what the hell's wrong with you? It's 10 minutes. That's unsafe. Safe is the person did, if you want to put it that way, betray your trust by being late. And then there's a conversation, and that can repair that disruption. We as human beings have the capacity for repair, but it means both people have to be willing to do that. So I actually think people still can be disappointed even when we discover a snake. I think that part of this work, the healing work, is to see that the snake is a snake, to not beat ourselves up when we have the recognition that the snake was a snake that we once again put our trust into, and to recognize that undoing trauma bonding is like unbraiding like Rapunzel's hair. It's going to take a while, and all those lines of hair are connected. So I'm going to end on that. I know someone said they're an RN and was interested in that adverse childhood trauma. Maybe my team can put that up. I don't know if this is by invitation or how that works. Perhaps whoever wrote that question, if you could send that to our email, we might be able to connect you with those conference organizers. And again, just keep your ears open. We're going to be doing lots of Instagram live. Now that I've done this, I might even do yet another on Betrayal Alive, because there's so many good things here to talk about and important things here to talk about. We're going to do 2 a day for the next couple of weeks, just to get excited about not only the book, but this I'm so excited about this interview package. I'm going to listen to it again, honestly, in the car, because it was such an amazing set of interviews. So bless you all. There is life after betrayal. And maybe we're just like my little cat. We just walk on the comforter a little bit more carefully. And you know what? It just makes her more beautiful and lovable, if that's even possible. So bless you all for attending. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, I hope all that we're doing helps you with your healing, all of our content, YouTube healing program, and certainly the book, and now this package of interviews. Thank you so, so much. And I hope we were able to answer all of your questions. Kelly Irene Zaide, can I sign off?
Yep, all good.
Thank you.